Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the DLM webinar from Redgate Software and SQL Server Central. I'm just going to go ahead and sponsor it because I'm here. Today we're going to go through kind of what DLM is a little bit and show you how well you can build a DLM lifecycle and how you can smoothly move database changes from development all the way through production. Myself and Arnie are here from Redgate Software, and we're going to talk about things. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Steve Jones, and I run SQL Server Central. I was a founder, and I'm the editor now. I've also been a DBA since actually 1991, working on SQL Server, and then a network administrator for a few years before that. So I've had a lot of time over the years working with SQL Server in a variety of industries, big companies, small companies, power generation, finance, education, probably a few others I'm forgetting there as well, but I've had a lot of different experiences. All my contact information is here up on the screen, so please feel free to get a hold of me. And then let me let Arnie introduce himself as well.
Sounds good. Thank you, Steve. So, yeah, my name is Arnie Skandari, and I've been with Redgate for about 5.5 years as a technical sales engineer. And as part of my role, I've been working with a lot of customers or new customers who've been basically wanting to get on board with our DLM solution, so helping them with a proof of concept, making recommendation on best practices around processes, as well as implementation or rolling out to the team. So if you guys have any questions around DLM, or if you want to get started with the tools, definitely feel free to get in touch. Would be more than happy to help.
Excellent, excellent. So why don't you flip over the agenda, a couple of housekeeping things for everybody. So you should have a GoToWebinar control panel somewhere in the upper corner of your screen, somewhere up here or here. I don't know how to do this, but if you want to ask questions, there's a questions panel. Go ahead and ask those questions, and we'll try to answer them today. If we get too many, some of them will have to be answered offline, and we'll post that next week. We are also recording this webinar, so if you want to go back and watch something, you want to pass it to somebody else or review it later, we'll have a recording probably posted either Friday or Monday of this week. So with that, let me turn this over to Arnie, and why don't you go ahead and run through the agenda and show us what we can do with DLM.
Sounds good. So yeah, before we jump into the demo, we're going to run through a couple of quick slides here to talk about the challenges with database change management. This is basically just one of the monthly webinars that we do. And as Steve mentioned, our goal with these monthly webinars is to demonstrate how easy it is to integrate our database lifecycle management solution with different source control systems and application lifecycle management tools. And today we're going to use Git as our source control system and Atlassian Bamboo as the build and release management tool. So a lot of you are probably already familiar with Redgate and are either current users of some of our tools or have used our tools in the past. But I'd like to run a quick poll here to see which tools from Redgate our audience is most familiar with.
Okay, the poll's up, and come on, everybody, vote, vote, vote. There we go. We get a few people voting. All right, all right.
Nice.
Come on. At 39, 47. Come on. I want to get to 80%. I need all you guys to vote somewhere. 60%. A few more. Come on. Come on. There we go. 70.
Almost
Come
there.
on. Come on. 2 more people. Come on. Who hasn't voted? Vote now. All right. There we go. I got to push them a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
All right. There you go, Arnie.
Okay, great.
Polls closed.
Excellent. So for those of you who are new to Redgate, we've been specializing in SQL Server tools, especially for developers and DBAs, for just over 16 years now. We have over 600,000 IT professionals using Redgate tools, including the 91% of Fortune 100 companies. We're also pretty big on supporting the community, so we support a lot of free events such as SQL Saturdays. We also have our SQL Server Central and Simple Talk websites, where you can find thousands of free articles and training material on SQL Server and other platforms. So what's so challenging about database change management? I think it's pretty clear to all of us that it's the fact that deployment of databases is not as simple as swapping old code with new one and compiling it. Databases carry state and hold business critical data that needs to be safely preserved as part of every deployment. We find that most dev shops out there are already utilizing best practices around application lifecycle management and rapid delivery of their application code, but the databases are normally left out, and there are still a lot of manual processes involved in delivering database changes. And here are some common issues that a lot of database shops are facing today. There are still a lot of development teams or database development teams who don't use source control, and that normally results into the developers having to go through a set of manual steps to get their scripts over to DBAs or team members who are in charge of deployments to higher environments. And that can result into databases getting out of pace with application development. And even simple tests such as finding out who made what change can become pretty daunting and time-consuming. And when it comes to deployment, we need to make sure that we are executing the right changes in the right order on our target databases, going all the way to production. And without the right tooling and the right workflow, this can become a cumbersome process for developers and especially for operational DBAs. So our goal with DLM is to help build repeatability into your database delivery process, where you are continuously testing the production readiness of the changes that you apply to your databases. And this all starts with source controlling of the database changes and making sure that source control becomes the single source of truth. Validating and deploying small units of changes is also one of the key principles here. I myself have talked to a lot of DBAs who are required to review, thousands of line of scripts when it comes to deployments, and that normally can take, hours, if not days, depending on, how many bugs they find in those scripts. By committing database changes to source control on a regular basis, that opens the door to automated builds and tests to make sure that all of the small units of changes are tested and validated multiple times before you are ready to deploy to production, which can result into greater predictability over your releases and increased efficiency by eliminating the repetition of some of those manual steps. I think this statement from the 2016 DevOps Sphere is pretty relevant. IT shops who utilize best practices around continuous delivery deploy code more frequently and with more confidence, and that enables them to be more agile in their software delivery process and makes the company twice as likely to exceed their profitability. And in this case, our goal is to help narrow that gap by integrating the databases into your application lifecycle management process. So how can Redgate help? This diagram basically describes the workflow or the process going from development all the way to operations and deployments. So here we're basically showing how some of the components from our SQL tool belt can be utilized to achieve database lifecycle management. And starting from the left here, in the development environment, you'd be using a set of components from SQL tool belt, which are productivity components, to help you get your database changes into your desired source control systems, such as Git, TFS, Perforce, or any other source control system that you might be using from within SSMS. So your developers would be working in SSMS, making changes, using our plugins to get their changes into their source control system. And once the changes are into source control system, we follow a state-based model, which means that we store the state of your database in source control by storing create scripts for your database objects. And when it comes to doing automated builds and deployments, we rely on the engine of our market-leading compare tool to do builds for your databases. So the build process basically includes validation of your database state, making sure that there are no broken dependencies or broken objects or any SQL Server syntax or compilation errors. Again, we plug into different types of build systems or release tools. Today we're focusing on Bamboo, but as you can see, you can do Jenkins, TeamCity, TFS, or any other tool that makes sense to you. Once your changes are validated and tested in your build environment, then you can basically, that spits out a NuGet package, which can be used as a source of deployment going to your higher environment. And then as far as doing deployments, then you rely on a set of PowerShell commandlets that come as part of DLM Automation component of SQL Tool Belt to help you easily define and configure your deployment steps through your release management tool to your higher environment. And once your changes are deployed all the way to production, then we have a set of monitoring tools. So we have SQL Monitor, which is our performance monitoring and alerting tool. Unfortunately, today we won't be able to go over that since we only have an hour booked for this webinar. And we also have the DLM Dashboard, which is our drift detection tool that we'll quickly go over. And that's actually a free tool that you can easily get up and running with within a matter of minutes. All right, so now let's go ahead and switch to my VM here so we can start the demo. I'm going to show my middle screen here.
Okay, there we go.
All right.
See it?
Okay, perfect. So we're basically going to follow that diagram that I just described. So we'll start up in our development environment, make a couple of changes, get those changes into source control, and run automated builds and tests, and then go through releases to our higher environments. The database that I'll be working with today, so I'm representing Steve. So I'm working with this database, blogs.redgate dev Steve. You notice my database icon is green. This is an indicator of the database being linked to source control. So in this case, I'm using Git. And since Git is a distributed source control system, the workflow is that you check in your changes to your local repository first, and then you push those changes to your remote. In this case, everything's set up locally on my machine. So if I go to my Setup tab here for this database, you can see that it's currently linked to this local repository that I've linked to. So now I'm going to go to the Commit Changes tab. We shouldn't have any changes to commit at this point, so I'm going to go ahead and start making a couple of changes here. So I'm going to modify one of my objects here. Actually, let's do this one. So here I'd like to replace the select star with actual column names. So here SQL Prompt is another one of our productivity tools that easily gets integrated into SSMS and makes it really easy and fast for you to write SQL. So I'm going to go ahead and select the columns that I want to include as part of this select. And I can also use the formatting feature that comes as part of Prompt to make sure that my code is easy to read and it follows a style that my team has basically committed to. So go ahead and make my change here. And as soon as you make changes to your database object, SQL Source Control will basically show blue blobs next to the objects that are modified. So you can set the polling interval. In this case, I think mine is set up to 20 seconds, but I can easily refresh that by using this option here. So these blue blobs are nice visual indicators of objects that have been changed that you need to check into source control. So if you're working on your own dedicated database, then this will be changes that you've made to your database. But if you're on a shared database, then you can easily see what other objects are being modified by other developers. Going to the commit tab here, you can see exactly what changes you need to commit. If you're working on a shared database, this commit tab would only have the changes made by yourself selected. So I've logged in as this Redgate user here. So and for that reason, this change is already checked for me. So here at the bottom, you can see exactly what's different between the development version of that object and what's in source control already. So you can see exactly how the object definition is being changed as part of this commit. Now, before I make another change, I'd actually like to make a data change to one of my lookup tables. So, there are solutions out there where you can do that by doing pre-deployments and post-deployment scripts, but with us, we actually integrate this nicely into your actual release and the deployment script. So what you can do with our SQL Source Control solution is to go to other SQL Source Control tasks and say link or running static data. This will give you a list of tables that you have on your database, and from there you can select the ones that are considered as reference tables or lookup tables to you. In this case, I have two tables, RSS feeds and country codes that I'm source controlling in terms of data. So I'm going to go ahead and insert a new record in the RSS feed table. Oops. Okay, so I'm going to add a new feed. I'll call this the Bamboo demo. All right. So made a data change, added a new record, go back to SQL Source Control, refresh my changes to commit. Now you can see I have a data to also commit to source control. So we keep track of data as insert scripts, as you can see here at the bottom, and we keep track of store procedures or any other object or schema as create scripts. So I'm going to go ahead and write my check-in comment here. So we modified PRC get contacts to replace star with columns.
And
added
comment.
Yeah, I try.
I like seeing those good comments, right?
Added a
That
new,
makes sense.
exactly, yeah. Added a new RSS. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and commit the source control. Notice that I didn't even have to save any of the scripts that I executed on my development environment. All you need to do is to make your changes and get those changes into source control. So since I'm using Git, here you can see it's giving me the option to also push to my remote repository. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. You can either do this from within SQL Source Control, or if you're more comfortable with the command line of Git or another Git client tool such as SourceTree, then you can easily do that through those environments as well. So I'm going to go ahead and push this to my master branch. It's the only branch I'm working on. If you have a branching strategy, then you would have to use the Git command line or SourceTree or any other Git client tool to switch your branches or to merge changes from one branch to another. So now that I checked in my change.
While we're doing that, while you've done it, why don't we run that poll real quick? I'd like to see what version control systems people are using.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's do that.
All right, so everybody, if you could just answer the poll, we're just curious what version control systems you're using. I tend to prefer Git. I don't know what you like most of all, but
yeah, I think I like Git mainly for its branching and merging functionality. It's just easier to work with branches in Git since you're not keeping multiple copies of your code in different branches. But as far as my experience with different customers, I think TFS is still the most popular, and then it's Git. But I've noticed that a lot of shops are actually starting to move towards Git now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've closed the poll now, so you can keep going. But I know that, like, even when I use TFS, I use Visual Studio Online. I tend to use the Git interface to put code up there rather than TFS.
Yeah. So it looks like our audience, are 50% Git users, which is great, and TFS is second there. So excellent. All right. So I checked in my changes. As part of SQL Source Control view, you'll have the option to see a history of changes that you've made. So if I go here and say View History, this will basically show you all the commits that you've done locally to your local repository. So you can see your Git hash, the date, the name, and finally the comments and the files that are affected. And you can see what version it was previously and what it is now as part of that commit that you're looking at. So when I checked in my changes, that actually went ahead and triggered a build. Before I move on to the build side of things, there's a couple of things that I'd also like to point out. So if you're working in a dedicated model where you're working on your own database, this Get Latest feature becomes really handy because this is the feature that you would use to basically pull from the remote changes that have been made by other developers. And once those changes are in your local repository, then you can apply them to your actual development database. So this Get Latest feature is used for those scenarios. I don't need to use this now because I'm really the only person working with this database, and there's no other changes on the database from other folks. So, but if you are working in a dedicated model, then this Get Latest feature is what you would use. If you're in a shared model, then we provide this locking mechanism here, so you can easily lock objects. So you can say lock this object, and that will put a lock icon next to it. So whoever's using SQL Source Control, they will see that this object is locked. If they try to execute a change on the database, or sorry, on that object, it will throw an error saying that this object is locked. So if you want to see who locked it, you can go to the locking tab, and that would show you the name of the person who's locked it and the date when it was locked. And you can either speak to them, or if you know they're no longer working on it, then you can easily just unlock the selected objects. All right, so I'm going to move on to the build side of things. So again, we're using Bamboo. So if I go to my build activity, okay, you can see that our build just finished and it was successful. I'm going to walk you through the build steps that we've set up here. So we provide a plugin to Bamboo, which makes it really easy for you to interact with our build steps and configure them. So if I go to my plan configuration here, I have a total of 2 tasks from Redgate. So one is called the build, which is basically doing that validation by comparing what you have in source control against a temporary empty database, and tries to build a database from scratch just to make sure that all of your objects within the database or within the copy of the database in source control are valid, and that there's no syntax errors with any of the files that you have in source control. Once that database build is successful, then it goes ahead and packages up the database into a NuGet package. So this is the name of our NuGet package, and the version gets automatically assigned as the build number for that NuGet package. And you can specify where you want that temporary database to be built. So in this case, I'm doing a local DB, which is SQL Server Express, and it gets installed as part of our DLM Automation component. Or you can use a specific instance of SQL Server. So for instance, if you have link servers or dependencies to other databases, then you would have to do the build on a SQL Server instance where those dependencies are available. Once the build is done, then we run a test step. So this test step relies on our SQL test tool and a couple of testing frameworks. One is called tsqlt, which is a unit testing framework, and the other one is called SQL Cup. So if I go back to my database here, you can see there are some objects with SQL Cup schema, and some are with tsqlt schema. So SQL Cup actually provides you with a set of tests out of box that you can use for your database. Here I'm only using a selection of those tests. There's actually a lot more SQL Cup tests that are available that you can use. But some of the ones that I'm using here, you could use SQL Cup for, enforcing coding standards, or, do some performance checks and things like that. So in this case, I have one that makes sure that there are no stored procedures starting with SP underscore because it's bad practice. I also have another one related to performance, so making sure that there are no stored procedures with set row count. And a couple more here. So the good thing with these type of tests is that it's pure SQL. So if you want to customize any of these tests, you can simply go in and modify them and execute the changes, and it will. That's how you would customize your SQL Cup test. Now, on the other hand, tsqlt, which is a unit testing framework, it provides you with a set of objects here that you can use to create unit tests for your database. So, for instance, here I've got one called fake table, which enables you to create a fake table of an existing table, and I've actually used that in one of the unit tests here. So if I open up this unit test and show you what we're doing. So it's a very simple unit test. So we're testing the store procedure PRC at contact, and we're doing that by creating that fake table of our contacts table first, populating that table with some data using the PRC at contact store procedure, and making sure that the data that gets added matches the data that we're expecting. If they don't match, then this unit test will fail, and it will fail the build as a result. You can also run your tests locally using the SQL test plugin, so you can easily run SQL tests here, and you can go ahead and run whatever tests that you want to run locally on the development database. You can do that easily from within SSMS. So going back to our build log here, so this is basically the log of what we did. So validated all the objects and created our NuGet package, and also an a JUnit report of the tests that we executed on our database as part of the build. So now that the build was successful, that means we now have a NuGet package that we can use as a source of deployment going to our higher environment. So I think at this point it would make sense to run another poll to see if you guys are already using Bamboo or any other build systems, or if you're planning to use a specific build system.
Yep, I've opened it up, Arnie, so people are answering now.
Okay, perfect.
What's your favorite build system? You know, I know you've worked with a lot of them, different customers.
I'd say my favorite is probably still TeamCity, because it's just easy to work with, and it actually gives you a lot of freedom in terms of adding, you know, custom artifacts. So if you want to save, you know, specific, like your NuGet package or your test results as new tabs and artifacts in TeamCity, you can easily do that. So although TFS, you know, they've made a huge improvement as part of TFS 2015, but I'd say they still have ways to go to catch up with TFS. Sorry, with TeamCity. So
TeamCity, yeah. I mean, I think I tend to prefer TeamCity. I do a lot with TFS and Visual Studio Online, and
yeah,
the 2015 update to it changes were amazing, and I really liked them. But
yeah,
it's hard to tell. It's pretty close, though, I think, between those two.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right, this poll's closed, and you can move on.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so it looks like still good percentages using TFS. So I don't know if you guys attended, you know, our previous webinars, where we used TFS, but if you didn't, we actually have those webinars recorded on our website that I'll point out towards the end of this demo, that you can go and, you know, watch that. All right, so so I'm going to go ahead and now try to basically deploy my changes to my next environment. I actually have both automated triggers set up for deployment to my integration environment, and manual triggers for my higher environments, such as my staging and production environment. So I'm going to switch to the deploy tab here. So we're using Bamboo for doing deployments as well. So I have a deployment project here, as you can see here, and I've got 4 environments that we'll be deploying to. You notice my integration environment already got updated with the latest release, and because I had set up an automated trigger, so every time I have a successful build, it automatically goes ahead and triggers a deployment to the integration database. And you can easily see that here. So I'm going to quickly walk you through. Actually, before doing that, I'm going to go ahead and trigger the deployment to my testing environment. So I'm going to push that same release that we automatically deploy to our integration database. And that's started deployment. And while we're waiting for that, I'm going to quickly walk you through the deployment steps that I've set up for my different environments. So again, for integration environment, you know, that got triggered automatically. So here I've set up a trigger to automatically deploy after successful build plan. And as far as my steps, I'm using our PowerShell commandlet to first create a database release, which basically it creates a report of what differences exist between your NuGet package and your target database that you're deploying to. And that creates an HTML report where you can review the update script as well as the differences between the NuGet package and your database. And then the next step is to deploy that update script that we created as part of the previous step. So these are the 2 steps that I've configured. We actually have detailed documentation on our website and some examples of how you can configure these in Bamboo. So you can just copy the scripts from there and get up and running with it within your environment. So for my acceptance environment, however, I've got one additional step here. So here you can see I've got a step called refresh from production, because in order to make sure that my acceptance matches production, we're running a comparison between our production database and the acceptance database, mainly in terms of schema, to make sure that the schema matches before we deploy to the acceptance database. So once that's done, then I go ahead and go through the same steps as I had within my testing environment. So create the release and deploy from the database release. And for my production, I simply take the script that I generated in acceptance, because we made sure that acceptance matched production, and I execute that same script. But our process actually has a drift detection functionality built into it. So first, it makes sure that the target database to production is still at the state when we generated that script. So, and the way we do that is we keep track of, the state of your database before deployment and after deployment through scripts folder. So if I go to my testing environment, for example, and we just deployed release 10, and here you can see I have states. One is source, one is target. So source is basically the state that we want to get our target to, and the target is the state at which the target database should be at in order for this update script to successfully get executed. So what it does is that it compares this target folder to the current state of the database to make sure they match before it executes that update script. So that's how we basically detect drifts. And if there is drifts, then the deployment will fail, letting you know that the target state is no longer at the state that we have in this target folder. So I'm going to go back to my deployment report here, and you can see deployment to testing was also successful. So now I can go ahead and deploy that to my acceptance environment. And while we're doing that, I'm going to show you what that report looks like. So the report of the differences and the update script. So I'm going to go back here. Let's look at our testing environment that we just deployed to. And if you look at this report, the changes.html file will actually show you exactly what has been deployed. So here are the two changes that I made. So the PRC get contacts. As you can see, we follow a Git style here to show you how the object definition has been modified. So we replace select star from with the actual column names, and we insert a new record in the RSS feeds table. And if there's any warnings, so our compare engine would throw warnings if there is changes that could result into data loss or deployment errors. So you would see those here. In this case, we don't have any of those. And finally, the actual deployment script that got executed on my testing environment. So here's the alter for this procedure because it already exists, and here's the insert for that new record that we added. And the nice thing is that everything gets encapsulated into a single transaction. So if anything fails, during the execution of this script, it will roll back the script to the beginning, so it doesn't leave your target database in an inconsistent state. So so as part of the deployment, we have a nice integration with our DLM dashboard. So our build process actually can send a report of the state of the database that it built to our DLM dashboard. So that way, if that same state gets deployed to your other environments, it will be detected as an update as opposed to a drift. So just going to show you what that looks like here. And again, DLM Dashboard is a free tool and really easy to get up and running with. So if you haven't tested the tool or haven't used it, I would highly recommend you to give it a shot within your environment. So here you can see this is my blogs.redgate pipeline. Integration got updated, testing got updated, and acceptance got updated. And you can see it's actually reading the state from my build process. So if you remember, our build was at version 22. So it's saying that my integration database got updated to the version that was included as part of that build number 22 in Bamboo. And you can go in and actually review your changes. So if I go in here, you can see exactly what objects have been modified. So it shows you what type of objects. It shows you which user made those changes. And you can see the state of that object before the deployment and after. And you can easily go ahead and acknowledge your changes, and that would turn your database or your environment back to green. And you can do the same for your other environments. So there's in general two, as I said, there's two types of changes. So one is an update. So it's a state that it recognizes. In this case, it recognized the state because we sent that report from the build state, from our build to DLM Dashboard. But if it doesn't recognize a specific state, then it would switch to a drift mode. So for instance, if I go to my production database and I make a direct change to production, so let's go to our production database here and modify our objects.
Just so you know, Arnie, I would never do this in production. This is not something that I would do.
Exactly, yeah. Unless you have a really, really good reason.
Exactly. It have to be a really good reason.
Exactly, yeah. So go ahead and make this change. And here you can see the color the tabs are colored using our SQL prompt tool. So if I'm working on a production database, you know, it's very obvious and clear. All right, so I'm going to go back to DLM Dashboard, and now you can see my production is in drift mode because it's now changed to a state that DLM Dashboard had never seen before. And then when you go to review, you can see that, again, what type of change, you know, who made the change, and how what objects have been modified and how. And you can see here it says this change came directly from SSMS, whereas if I look at the other changes that we deployed previously, it says they came from DLM Automation. So you can easily see where these changes actually came from to your higher environments. So yeah, and you can also set up notifications here, so you can email you know, specific team members when there is drift on your databases, so they'd be notified. And if those changes are actually valid changes, then you would need to make sure that those changes are you know, reflected back on your development environment, so that way it goes into source control and it's included as part of the next release, so that way you don't override those changes when you do your next release. So so yeah, I think we have one final poll here.
Yeah, let's run that. And while he's doing it, so a few questions came in, Arnie, maybe you want to just address for everybody else. Somebody asked, can DLM work with AWS RDS, so the SQL Server from Amazon?
I actually haven't tested this myself. So it works with you know, the virtual machine, so SQL Server instances in, you know, on the Amazon virtual machines. So it works with that. But I'm not sure if it works with the cloud-based databases. Do you know if we do, Steve? I know.
Yeah, as far as I know, I thought we had tried one of the pieces. It's a good thing to try with the PowerShell and see if it does. But it should work because you essentially just have a normal, you know, SQL Server TDS connection.
Exactly. Yeah.
To the SQL Server. So I would assume that everything would work. We don't install, you know, the DLM process doesn't install anything onto that integration or test or staging or production server. So exactly. Really it's just making, you know, standard SMO type calls or, you know, calls we've coded from the client to the server. So I would assume it works. You know?
Yep.
But let's add that as a list. The other thing is somebody's asking about in the NuGet package, do we just have the SQL changes or what's in the NuGet package?
Really good question. So the NuGet package actually contains the same folder structure that you have in source control. So if I just quickly go to my source control folder here, which is something I forgot to show everyone earlier on, so my apologies. So if I go here.
Can't remember where it is, can you?
Yeah. Got to copy the path from here.
I do that too. Working with too many databases, sometimes I forget where my Git repository actually exists.
Exactly, yeah. So this is the actual folder structure that we copied to the NuGet package. So instead of just those change scripts that you execute, we actually put the state, the whole database at that specific state after you made the changes into the NuGet package. And then when it comes to the deployments, we run a comparison between the state of your database from this folder structure against your higher environments to figure out what's different and what update script would need to run to get your target database to match the state that is in the NuGet package.
Excellent, excellent. Somebody else is asking about, we had a comment that if you work with Jira, you can put the ticket URL in SQL Source Control comments and it'll link things over, that's kind of a nice little thing to do.
Exactly, yeah. That works with
And then,
TFS work items too, yeah.
yeah. And then in terms of deployments, how, if you have SQL agent jobs and SQL agent integration services packages, how do we address that in this process? I know we don't really
Yeah,
get back.
yeah. So you're absolutely correct. So we don't have an out-of-box solution for source controlling jobs or anything at the server level or on the BI side of things. However, we've had a couple of customers who use the migrations feature of SQL Source Control to basically provide ad hoc scripts to basically deploy the agent jobs or to script out the jobs and execute them on the target environments. But this migration script is really mainly used for overriding the default behavior of compare or to take care of situations where a comparison tool may not be able to handle properly. So one good example is refactoring tables or columns where you're splitting tables or splitting columns and you have to take care of the data as well. You would use this migration script to provide those scripts as part of the deployment, and then our compare engine will recognize them. So this ad hoc, blank scripts is mainly used for data-only migration. So if you're doing pure DMLs for data fixes and those type of things, you can store them as migration scripts. But as I said, we've had a couple of customers who also scripted out their agent jobs and saved them as migration scripts and ran them against their targets. And that works too. The only thing with this is that all these scripts are only ran once. So these are one-off scripts. And we use a table in your target environment to keep track of what migration scripts have been executed and what migration scripts are pending.
Yep, there we go. Can you unselect some folders like assemblies when you're linking to source control? Is there a way? I mean, you can filter, right? I guess
Exactly,
that's what you're doing there.
Absolutely, yeah. So you would use the filter option in SQL Source Control to do that. So you can go into other SQL Source Control tasks and say edit filter rules, and from here you can say I don't want to source control assemblies or users, roles, or any other type of objects that you wouldn't want to put in source control or are different from your development going into your next environment. So.
All right. So here's an interesting one. Somebody says, if I write code that I want to test deploy in schema A, but in production there's data in other schemas, B, C, and D, is there some sort of filter so you can ignore B, C, and D when doing deploys?
Yeah, so that, again, you would be using this filter option here. So you would say exclude if schema name begins with B or another condition, schema name begins with C and another one for D, and that will basically exclude those when it's doing the comparison.
And then what about for data, DLM Dashboard as well? Can you exclude items from checking?
Mm-hmm. So you can apply the same filter. So what this filter does is that it adds a file called filter.scpf, and then you can use that same file from source control and point it to DLM Dashboard, so that way DLM Dashboard uses the same filter. So when you go into DLM Dashboard and look at your projects, here you can see there's an option to filter objects. And I can go ahead and say, so let me just save this. So from here, you can go ahead and file, either check out that filter file from source control and point it to that, and it will use the same filter file to basically compare the states of your databases.
Yeah, actually, I have a blogging draft with that exact process in there. I need to go put that out there.
Nice.
Yeah. So, I don't really see any other questions. If there's anything else you want to show, Arnie, to wrap it up here?
Yeah, I think we covered everything else. Unless there's anything you think I missed or.
No, I mean I think you've covered most everything that we would show here. If you're, I guess a couple other things. If you are in the UK, we've got a former sales engineer partner that actually will do training on some of these things, and we have a few partners in the US as well that do training. So if you'd like to get some training, please feel free to check out redgate.com/training or find a consultant, and we've got people there. DLM Dashboard is free, and so I would encourage you guys to just give it a try. Download it, put it on production, see if things are drifting, put it in. I don't love putting in development, but putting it into integration test environments and seeing that the code we were doing in our shared development database actually gets deployed correctly is kind of a nice feature as well.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And again, this webinar is recorded, so we'll put the recording online as well as the answers to the questions that were posted on the webinar. So if you want to basically see the recording of this webinar or any of our previous webinars, you can go to our red-gate.com library page, and from here you can actually filter by type. So if you're only interested in webinars, you can go ahead and take a look at the previous webinars we've done with different types of products. So here's the one with TFS, here's the one with Git, TFS build, and so on. We also have some really good ebooks and documentation and case studies for DLM that you can take a look at as well. So.
Hey Arnie, is there a setup for the Team City integration? Do we have a step-by-step? I know we have a webinar in the past, but has somebody
There
written?
is. Yeah, so if you go to our documentation site, so which is documentation.red-gate.com, and if you go to DLM Automation, and then here we have some tutorials, and then actually it's probably under Get Started. Oh, here, using the add-ons. And then from here you can select the, use the Team City plugin. And there's a step-by-step walkthrough of how to configure the steps and how to use it.
Okay. Have you uninstalled DLM Dashboard? I don't think I ever have.
Sorry,
I would think it would uninstall easily, but
yeah, honestly, I haven't tried uninstalling it myself. I've just been updating it to the latest version.
Yeah, my suspicion is, there's if it didn't install cleanly, there's a folder that holds all the executable stuff in the web server. There's 3 services that you would delete, and then obviously whatever database you've chosen on SQL Server you delete. So that's a good question. I'll have to check.
Yeah, I wonder if let's see if we have something on our documentation side here for DLM Dashboard. So
somebody says you have to download, there's a script to remove the trigger and object, so yeah, you'd have to remove the trigger. You could delete the database, but just the DL trigger you'd have to remove as well.
Yeah, so here it is. I think you'd find this documentation really useful. So here's the step-by-step guide of how to uninstall it, and then you can get the uninstall script here as well. So download the script, run it, and then delete the Redgate database, and if these folders exist, then go ahead and delete them as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, so give this a try. If it doesn't work, then reach out to us. We'd be more than happy to help.
Okay. So what else we have? Somebody says it seems like it would work good for single server database implementation. What about large distributed implementations using replication, MSMQ, service broker, things like that? Any advice there? So
generally, if you're dealing with a large number of servers and databases in production, if those target environments are at the same, those target servers and databases are at the same state, then you can easily basically take the script that you generate as part of your deployment to one of those databases and run that same script on the other ones. However, if those target environments are all at different states, then that would make things slightly more complicated, because then you would have to do one-by-one comparison to those target databases to see what's different and what update script should look like. So anything else you wanted to add to that, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I always try to say is there's no magic in how you make changes to SQL Server systems and deploy things. I mean, when you alter a table, you alter a store procedure, you add new objects, there's no magic in how that happens. We all have to learn and understand the concepts that Microsoft has put in place and the limitations that they have. With that in mind, what we're doing is we're allowing you some flexibility in how you move those changes from one system to another one. So how you would make that change in replication or with queuing services in place, depending on what you do, we can support some of that, we may not support some of it. For example, the migrations feature kind of allows you to code anything that will execute once. If you want to do a drop replication or suspend it, make changes, do a resync from backup, make the changes on the subscriber yourself, mark those changes as replicated. You want to do all that kind of coding. We don't have a great way to do some of that I think, Arnie, right? I mean, I think in that sense what you'd probably do is those specific items that are difficult to handle, what I would probably do is I would have steps in my release management tool. And nothing against Bamboo. Bamboo is a great product. I just don't really use Bamboo. I would probably look more at Octopus or at Visual Studio online deployment. And I would have steps in there that would perform that coding to disable replication. I would double up my deployments then, so my deployment would deploy to my publisher and my subscriber, and then I would have the coding in another step that would mark those changes as replicated and re-enable replication. Those are the kinds of things that I would do for that. For broker work, I'm not familiar enough with the challenges of deploying to broker stuff. I mean, if you're making changes to the service broker objects or MSMQ interfaces, I don't know. I mean, again, there's no magic in how you do those things. It's really about following the process and then ensuring that you code that in a way that it happens the same way every time, so that you're confident what's going to go on. And I would say that I know Octopus for sure does a good job of giving you the ability to set variables and have dynamic releases that follow the same process but may change slightly depending on what's released. And I would assume Bamboo would do the same thing.
Yeah, you can set up those environment variables in Bamboo as well. This is actually a good blog which talks about using database replication with automated deployments. So it was put together by a couple of our developers. So you can take a look at this, and it actually talks about pretty much everything that Steve just described, and a couple of additional stuff. So we'll include this in the email that goes around.
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, I think Jeff, you're asking this, and I think the way that you have to deal with this complex architectures, I think, almost makes it a requirement that you have a release management tool of some sort. TFS, Visual Studio, Bamboo, Octopus, whatever it is, you need some known process that's going to handle your messaging, your replication, your data distribution across multiple servers, because it's too easy for humans to mess that up. So what I would suggest is, as you do those deployments, either you have something like Camtasia doing a recording, or you have a person that automatically records everything that happens, and then you stick that process into a release management tool so that you're confident it will work every time.
That's great.
All right. Last one, let's do it real quick before we end this. Somebody asked about environment-specific static data. So if they've got something in production that's not valid in other environments like test, how would you deal with that?
Yeah, those are normally tough, because you're setting source control as your source of truth. So if there's like environment-specific data that you don't really have in your development environment or any of the other environments. That means you would have to somehow keep this, store those separately in source control and have some sort of additional step that uses the command line of our data compare tool to run a data compare between that folder and the corresponding environment where that data sits to update it. But the process of updating source control then would either be manual, or you would have to link the database where that data change come from to that specific folder, and then have a data comparison between the two.
I was thinking the separate there's two things, Alex. There is that one is you use SQL Source Control and you have a linkage from your production database to a different place in Source Control that you filter out everything but that static data, or maybe there's a couple objects you care about and you manually handle the updates there. That doesn't help with deployments. As Arnie said, you can use the command line of data compare or some other scripting to do that. And what I would probably do is in something like Octopus or Bamboo, use your environment variables to say, when I'm going to production, I need to run data compare with these variables that will go from this folder to this database and do the update. Right. But again, you're down to any change to that static data. You're depending on the humans, and there's no good way around that. I mean, there just isn't, because you can't test that stuff. You can't test a production mail server outside of production. So, there's no great way to do that. There are ways to do it with these tools or do it manually. I think release management tools help ensure that whatever you have stored, whether it's in version control or it exists in just some static folder, actually gets to the database.
Right.
That's the easy part, right? But just handling the updates, there's no good way to test those updates.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, all right, why don't we call it quits here? Thanks everybody for attending. Hopefully you've enjoyed this. As we mentioned, this has been recorded. We'll have the recording up on our YouTube channel probably Friday or Monday, and then we'll take these questions and we'll stick a FAQ out there on the Redgate. I believe this comes, I don't know, the Redgate library somewhere we have for the webinars listed, and we'll have the FAQ there, and I assume we'll have the link on the video as well, so you can answer these questions. If you've got more questions, you can get a hold of myself or Arnie, or you can email sales@support@ or dlm@redgate.com, and we're happy to answer any questions. So everybody have a great day. Arnie, thanks a lot, and
thank you.
Hope things go well out there. And we'll see you guys next month with another DLM webinar.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of the day.